Hi everybody, welcome. I am Heather Box and I am the co-founder of the Million Person Project.
Hi, I'm Julian McQueen, also co-founder of the Million Person Project. Thank you all for being with us today.
Yeah, and so the Million Person Project is a global project about love, storytelling, and connecting change makers. And what we do is we work with individual leaders and change makers, people like yourself who are up to creating a new vision for the world, to support them in telling their truest personal story as it relates to the work they're doing in the world or the message that they're carrying. Mm-hmm. And the reason why we do that is because we know that when people are really grounded in their personal story and sharing on that authentic level, that they are really, really powerful connectors, mm-hmm. that people can feel who that leader is, and that draws people in to your projects and to your work in more powerful ways. And so I see some of you all here, some of you are some really powerful storytellers on this call, so I know that you know the power of stories, and some of you are just starting this journey with us, mm-hmm. and so welcome. And our style is that we want to support you all. We want this next hour, we want you to have a breakthrough or come away with a new tool, something that you can use right away. So be applying everything that we're saying to you and speaking up in the chat box if you have questions about how it applies to you. So don't be shy.
Yeah, and there's so many different ways in which you can use this work. It's as Heather said, it's a tool that can be used in different ways. So some people, it's public speaking. Other people are integrating it into videos about their work. I know I was just talking to somebody last week who was doing a Indiegogo crowdfunding campaign, and they were really wanting to make sure that their story was shining through as they were asking people to support their project. That's a great use for it. People use it in writing. We'll share some stories about folks that we've worked with who've had really great articles that they've used the technique. So it can really be used in any number of ways, but ultimately it's about helping you find your true voice and applying that to the work that you're most passionate about. When you're really able to step in and stand up with your fullest voice, it gives a whole new level of power to whatever it is you're trying to move work around. I know I can feel it when I'm really tapped in and sharing my story. I feel different about the way I'm talking and about the way I'm able to connect with the audiences that I'm speaking with. And that's what we want for all of you all. We recognize that stories are universal, and they're a universal way of sharing, and they're a universal and really effective way of understanding and communicating, moving people to action. And so our life's commitment is around helping as many people as we can tap into that power for themselves and for the work they're most passionate about. So that's what today is about.
Yeah, and so hello and welcome to everybody who's just jumping on here, Danielle and Avis and Fina and Helen. Welcome. And so who do we work with? We have worked with 2,000 people from 69 different countries. We're a global project, and we spent a lot of time abroad working with activists and artists and educators on the ground in Vietnam, South Africa, Uganda, Brazil, all across the US, in communities and major cities and small towns. What we know is that this power, the power that you get from harnessing your story and being willing to be seen as your nuanced self, being willing to be seen as all of who you are, makes you a more powerful leader and makes the impact of your work deeper. Mm-hmm. And so here, to start it off, what we want to do is we just want to share about a couple of the people that we've worked with so that you can see yourself in their journey. Mm-hmm. And you can really see how you could walk through this process of standing in your power with your story in this way.
Yeah, so I'm actually really excited to share. This first one is from a note that Heather and I got this morning. This person worked with us in our first home study course earlier this year, and really glad to get to work with them. And this is the note that we got this morning, and you would think that we paid this person to send us this note. The timing is just wonderful, but honestly it just showed up in our inbox this morning, so we were so excited to get it. It says, quick note to say thank you, Julian, for your valuable comments. Success, audience in tears and a standing ovation. They said I'm the first standing O in their 7 years of the award. This is somebody who's receiving an award. There will be a video. It just might take a while for them to post it. We're excited to get that video, obviously, but this is someone who we worked with who was receiving an award and had, I think, seven minutes.
I think it was 4.
4 minutes, right? She had 4 minutes to share her story, to accept the award, and she was really committed to sharing a message in accepting that award that she felt like could move the audience and move the audience to action. We worked with her on that, gave her feedback. She already had really great content. We gave her some good feedback on it, helped her with that, and she rocked the house. So that's what's possible. First standing ovation in 7 years. We're really proud of that, and thank her for sharing that with us too.
Yeah, and what we want to show to all of you all, and I see some great new people joining, Sachi and Maureen and Terry and Lori. Hi.
Hey, Maureen.
Marisol, Luisa.
Hey.
So many great people hopping on the line here. And so what we want to share is that in the case of that person, you know, giving her 4-minute talk to receive her award that ultimately ended up in her feeling really in her power, and that being reflected back to her with the standing ovation, the first standing ovation that they'd ever had in this award ceremony. What she had to walk through to get there was a lot. During the group program, you know, there was a lot of resistance about which parts of my story do I share? Is this going to be too much? You know, and we were hearing that from all of you who wrote back to the email and who've been going back and forth with me. A lot of people are saying, you know, I feel like there's some shame standing in my path around sharing my story. I feel like I stand in my power sometimes when I share my story, but not at other times. I don't really know how to get my message out in a broad way. You know, I'm good at sharing other people's stories or working on other people's projects, but when it comes to me and standing powerfully and boldly for my own projects, that is a challenge. And so that's what this process does, is it walks you through the process of first exploring your story in this unedited way, and then identifying the values, and then being able to craft the narrative. But first, what you need is this strong foundation of what makes you you. And so this 4-minute talk did not come out of sitting down and thinking, what should she say? What should she say? It came out of her working for months on story excavation, values identification. And then the last part is crafting the narrative. And so, and lots of practicing in between there, and being willing to be seen in a story that you feel is clunky in your group, and you know, all of that stuff. And so I want to share one more story with you all. And this is from a client of mine who has become a dear friend, and his name is Anurag Gupta. And Anurag has a really amazing company where he does trainings on implicit bias. So he goes into hospitals and corporations and works with doctors and executives on identifying and breaking their implicit bias. So his message is that he's going to end racism in his lifetime. So you can imagine when someone says something like that, you're a little curious about, like, who are you and what's driving you and what makes you believe in yourself on that level, and what makes you that driven around this. And so when he came to us, it was like he was telling some stories about, you know, his life and things that he'd experienced that were challenging for him in terms of racism. But there was definitely like a level of his story that was missing. There was like, it didn't match the passion and the vision that he had. And so we walked through his story, you know, through the life mapping process, through the values identification process. And the reason why I want to share with you his story is because he had a lot of things on the Heather, I'm never sharing this list. He had a lot of those over there, which is like, I don't know what the implications would be. I have never even told my family this. I'm not sure that anyone cares about this. All of this was over there on that list. Mm-hmm. And so what we knew as his coaches is that we needed to stair step him in to being able to stand in his story. And so he's now public with his story. He's also given me permission to share his process. I've interviewed him about it. So this is all none of this is confidential, but there was a part of his story about the level at which he had internalized the racism that he felt after moving to the US from India. And there's a moment when he's in law school, after he's been trying to fit in, he changed his name from Anurag to Andy, and he just, he's being called names. His people are calling the police on him in his own doctor's office because they think he's suspicious. All of these things are happening, and it brings him to the brink. And he is standing on the edge of his 8-story window, considering jumping off. And sharing that story made him feel like it's going to take away from my credibility. People are going to think I suffer from depression, which he does. I'm worried about the stigma attached to those things. He's a super baller working with these big institutions. And so he stair-stepped. He first shared in he's a Buddhist practitioner, and he first shared in his place of gathering there in a very safe space. And the roof just blew off when he shared that story, and he got so much energy back from him, and people saying, Anurag, we've known you for years, but we feel so much more connected to you and your work now. Mm-hmm. And same thing, he just started doing it again and again. He won a couple fellowships, and the final round was telling his story. It was so amazing. And then ultimately, most recently, he got a TED Talk, and he shared it on a TED Talk, and it hasn't even been officially released yet, but the process of him stair-stepping into that was so powerful. And it was like, it was over the course of months. And so I just wanted to say to all of you that it's okay if you don't get ready to share your story overnight. Yeah. That it's okay for it to be a process, and it's a process for all of us.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add to that. I think I love that story because it really speaks to something that we heard from people responding to the questions that Heather sent out yesterday about what is driving you to share your story and what's stopping. And one of those, just the idea that you may recognize that your story has power, but you don't yet know how to stand in it fully, and you don't know how to stand in it consistently. And that's what I think I'm really proud of the work that we do, is because it helps people to tap into the power of their story fully and consistently. Your story is powerful, and it's going to, when you are really in touch with it, it will transform the way it will transform your work. It will transform the way that you are able to hold a room. It will transform your confidence in being able to stand up and deliver the message you want to deliver. Like, I'm confident in that. And I love that because it feels like so many people, and some of you on this line, no doubt, and me at times, we're on the edge, right? And we're almost sure that this is going to be helpful. We're almost sure that this is going to change lives, right? Like, we're almost sure that there's profound change here for us, but we're not quite sure. And so we help you get to that point of being sure and stepping into that. And boy, that feeling of knowing that you've shared a story and you see the impact immediately that you've had in a room, it's a really great feeling. And the more you feel it, the more you're able to do it. And that just, to me, it's about what that means for our world. When we have more people that are stepping up and stepping into their leadership in a way that transforms rooms, that's so critical for our world. And just knowing some of the people on the line here, the work that's being done, it's critical that it gets traction. And this is what really helps that, because it is when you're able to connect authentically, it just transforms what's possible. It transforms the possibility in the room. So I think Anurag's story is such a great example of someone who knows their work is important, knows that they are the person to be doing that work, but was unsure of how to share that and how to use that clarity around why they were the person to do the work to really lift up their work. Mm-hmm. And they found their path to that. And it's like, now it's every time, and not to say that there's not insecurities, we all have them, but every time he delivers, he's able to deliver a message that he knows is true, and he gets the results of what that true connection can bring.
Yeah, and so we have been hearing from so many of you recently and thinking about how to best serve you in getting to the next level with your story. And one of the things that we identified that could be helpful is for all of you to see the technique that we teach in action. And so we thought that we would have this class and have Julian share his story. And so, so Julian has shared his story all over the world, and he is a master orator, in my humble opinion. We're also a couple for 13 years.
So she's completely objective.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, so Julian is able to hold a stage in a way that I have, seen in very few people. And one of the things that I've watched him develop over the last 6 years as we've been doing this work is a whole other level of groundedness and truthfulness and honesty and vulnerability when he shares. Because he's just a great guy. People love him. He's funny. He can get away with getting up on stage and not bringing his truest message, and people still love him. And so for his own personal growth and for bringing forth the thing that is truest to him and most important for him, it's been a process for him to learn to tell his authentic story on this vulnerable level. Mm-hmm. And so I'm going to step away for a minute, and I'm just going to let him take the stage and share with you his story. And what I want you to do while you're listening is think about what is sticking out to you about his story as he shares. What are the parts of you? What are your reactions? What are your feelings? Because we're going to break this down next and help you all pick up the tools to be able to do this in your own life. And so I see so many great people jumping on here. Hi, Kristen and Yana and Sarah and Terry and Niraj. Please introduce yourself and say hello in the chat. And I'm going to step away now, and Julian will share with you his story.
Cool. All right. So thank you, Heather. Wow, this is a real, I'm appreciate you all tuning in today. And this is a real honor to be here with you. Heather, when we started this project, it was really, we had this belief around story, and we wanted to step into it and see what was there. And it's just been so inspiring. And today in particular, a day like today, when we put this call out and we say, hey, are you doing awesome work? And would you like to step up and step into that work in a deeper way through your story? And people make the call. It's just so people respond to that call and show up. It really is just humbling and inspiring, and helps us to understand that we are, we're doing what we're supposed to do. So I just want to start by saying thank you. And thank you for the honor of getting to share my story and giving me some time to do that. I don't take that lightly, and I appreciate it. So my story starts here in California, where I live. It starts in Oakland. My parents met in Oakland in the 70s. I have an older brother and a younger brother, and so my family started in West Oakland in the early 80s, living in West Oakland together. And Oakland at the time was experiencing problems that a lot of communities around the country were experiencing. First and foremost, the industries that had supported the Black working class community in Oakland and the working class communities across the Bay Area started to disappear. I know a factory that my dad worked in, that was a GM factory. That factory closed, right? Went overseas, went somewhere else. The shipping industry started to decline in some ways, and we still have a port, but it got smaller. Those jobs started to dry up. So that was really an important thing that started to happen throughout cities across the country at that time. The other thing that was really devastating for West Oakland in a lot of places was that crack cocaine showed up in the early 80s and started to infiltrate the community. And where we lived in West Oakland was ground zero for that. We lived at the end of a street that was, our street abutted the largest apartment complex in West Oakland. And it was getting wild, and it was getting really challenging. And my dad at the time was working at a nonprofit. He was a liaison between the police department and the community. And he saw some things within the police department that were really unsettling to him and made him feel like Oakland was going to be a really challenging place to raise his kids. And one that he was really seeing that the police department that they were being strategic in how they enforced laws, and they were allowing crime to bubble up in certain places. and using that to justify their budget. And this is what he felt like he was seeing. And he felt like the deck was stacked. And he and my mom talked about it, and they decided to move us out of Oakland. So when I was young, about 4 years old, we moved out of Oakland to a place called Ferndale. And Ferndale is up in the north coast of California, about 4.5 hours north of San Francisco and Oakland. It is about as different from Oakland as you can get on the lower 48 states. It is a very small rural community. It's about 1,000 people. There are more cows than people in Ferndale. It's a dairy farming community, so there's more cows than people there. And it's really beautiful. It's in the giant redwoods. It's on the coast. It's just a very beautiful place. And I think for me, that back and forth between the country and the city has been a really important part of my life. And one of my favorite parts of that was our family. We had some cousins, Derek and Vanessa, that came and joined us and moved up to Humboldt County with us. And we had our cousins rolling with us up there. And we also had Bert and Nayland, who were the same in between me and my brothers in age. So we were all kind of together at the same age, and they stayed in Oakland. But they would come up and visit us, and it was so awesome. Our city cousins coming to visit us, and we get to show them what country living was about. We took them camping for the first time, and I remember them seeing the stars without light pollution for the first time. When you see the night sky without light pollution, how many stars there really are in the sky that you can see, and seeing them not being able to look away, and we took them swimming and swimming in the river. This is not a pool, this is the river. And initially they were terrified. There were rocks. Those rocks had moss on them. There were little fish swimming around. Little fish could be a strong indicator of bigger fish, which could be dangerous. They were not feeling it. But, after a few minutes, maybe 30 or 40 minutes, and once we found like a great jumping rock to jump into the river, everything changed. They were thrilled. We had a blast. So that was the type of thing that we got to do with them, and it was so great for us. And then in a true spirit of cultural exchange, we would go down to Oakland and get to stay with them for a while. And it would be during the summer, and we'd be hanging out in Oakland with our cool city cousins, and they would show us what city life was about. And they were always a little hipper to the music that was taking place. Like they were on to MC Hammer when we were still listening to the Fat Boys, and they would bring us up to speed and tell us what the clothes were to be wearing and all of that. And I remember the fact that they could just walk to the corner store to get their candy bars. I was a big Three Musketeers fan at the time. And so I could go get my Three Musketeers on my own without my parents. And where I grew up, the store was 6 miles away. So this was true freedom. And that exchange was just so wonderful. It meant so much to us. And it was interesting because when we were down there in Oakland, my family, our whole family would go. My mom and dad would be there. They would be visiting their friends. They would be back in the old neighborhood and enjoying themselves, getting to see and be with family. They were clearly so happy. And we would overhear them talking about how they wish that we didn't have to sell our house in Oakland, and, considering, well, maybe we could live here and we could come back, and, just playing around with this. And it was, their heart was in Oakland, but they left. And we would ask, if you love Oakland, why did we leave? And what my dad would say, and what he'll still say today, if you ask him, he said, I wanted you to grow up in a place where I felt like kids could be kids as long as they need to be. I wanted my boys to just be boys and not have to worry about these pressures of the world. And that was what he said to us. And that's how he explained it. And me and my brothers appreciated that. And we got it on some level. My parents were pretty woke, as the kids say these days, and they helped us to stay informed and understand some of the issues that were taking place. And so we got it on some level. But for me, it really came into focus when I was 19. And this is what transformed my life and my understanding of my path. When I was 19, I just graduated high school. Bert and Nayland, my cousins, were still in Oakland, and they were 16 and 18. And they were going to high school. Nayland was about to finish up. Bert was going into his junior year. And what happened that really changed my life is that they started running with an older crew in West Oakland, started running with some older dude from the neighborhood. And that guy convinced them to try to rob a jewelry store. And they had guns and masks, and they had the whole nine. And I give thanks to God to this day, because nobody was hurt in that effort. Nobody was hurt in that caper. But they were caught, and they were locked up, and they were after arrested and tried, and they were sentenced to 14 and 17 years, respectively, in the adult penitentiaries here in California. They were 16 and 18 at the time. They were still in high school. They'd never been arrested. They'd never even been suspended. And so that was a moment, it was something that I didn't think possible, knowing them. And it was a moment that our whole family just kind of screeched to a halt. I remember my dad getting that phone call and just hearing the exasperation in his voice as they were telling him what was happening. And it was devastating for our whole family and for Bert and Nayland, and their whole youth was just done, right? Like they were not even out of high school and they wouldn't get out until their 30s. And that was so hard to even understand as a 19-year-old when you're talking about a sentence that's as long as you've been living. And that was devastating to me. And I will say that was when I started to really understand for myself what my dad meant by this concept of a place where kids could be kids. And I started to recognize that there were systemic issues in place and systemic things taking place that made Oakland and West Oakland a more challenging place to just be a kid. Whether it was the situation that my dad identified with the police department or generally the relationship between the police department and the community and the heavy police presence, whether it was the schools that they had access to and the resources that were not being invested in those schools. What does that mean for what someone sees and understands as their path forward? Or any number of other issues, the disappearing opportunities and jobs in the community. All of these things were contributing to West Oakland being a place where it was just more hard to be a kid and just be a kid. And I started to get that and understand that. And that's really what shaped my path for the last 15 years in the work that I've done is a belief that those systems are in place. And there are ways in which we can transform them and put them on their heads or destroy them and shift them. And that's the work that I have been so lucky to get to do in a number of ways. I worked for a lot of years at an organization called Green for All, working to create jobs and opportunity in the green economy. Jobs and opportunity pathways to success are a critical piece of that. And it's the work that I do. And I'm so grateful to do it, the Million Person Project, because what I've come to understand is that there is no one answer to healthy communities. There's no one answer to ensuring that every community is one that is flourishing, is one that has opportunity and possibility for everybody in there, that we all hold a piece of that puzzle. And that's why it's so great to have you all on the line with us today, because as I know some of the people on the line here, I know that you are holding a piece of that puzzle. Through your work, I know there are folks on the line who are doing the work to create jobs and opportunity to provide training for people who are looking for a new way of being and a new way forward. I know there are people doing that work. I know there are people who are at the center of activism and spirituality and trying to understand how we can show up more as fully as who we are and tap into all the wisdoms of our world and all the ways that we learn and use that to help us find connection and move forward together. I know just by virtue of you signing up for this, that you understand that you have a role to play. When we started doing the publicity for this workshop, we said, do you have a story that you know could help change the world? And you all answered yes by being here, by signing up. That to me lets me know that you are the people that are holding the pieces of that puzzle. And that's why it's so great to get to be here. And that's why we do the work that we do. And with that, today, I want to ask you all to really sit with us for the next 30 minutes that we have together and sit with the knowledge that you are holding a story that is critical to this shared path that we have, to this path that we have that is about ensuring that all communities are ones that are healthy, that are generative. You hold a piece of that puzzle. And your story is a critical part of you being able to maximize your effect and being able to maximize the work that you do. And I look around today and I'm struck by a couple things in our world. In some ways, it feels like we are careening towards the abyss. And there's so much going on in our country and around the world. And it feels like things are out of control. But I am blessed and fortunate enough to be surrounded by people who represent hope and who represent a different path and who are being courageous in their efforts to find and create connection. And I think that is as powerful and more powerful of a force in our world right now. And I'm seeing the way our world is changing for the better. And I'm seeing the way that people are stepping into those areas of connection and being courageous in the way that they're showing up for their work and showing up in the world. And I know that you all are the people that are doing that. And I know that we can create a world that bends towards justice, that bends towards possibility. And I also know that your story is a critical piece of that puzzle. And so for the next 30 minutes, I want you to know and understand that and sit with that. And I want you to think about who are the Bert and Naylands in your community? Who are the people in your community that might be shifted by your story? Who are the people that might see themselves just a little bit in who you are or perhaps in who you were and say, well, if they can do it, I can do it too. Who are those people? Who are the people that can support your work? Who are the people that could show up for you and say, yes, I see what you're doing and I want you to do it for 1,000 more people in the next 2 years? Who are those people? Think of that person in your head and think about the power of your story. If they understood more deeply and fully who you are and why you do what you do, how would that transform your relationship with them? How would that transform the possibility of them stepping into your work, of them seeing themselves in your work? Because that's the power of story. That's the power of your story. Your story is one that can connect with somebody in a way that nobody else's can. And it's a way that can open up people's understanding of who you are, why you do what you do, and most importantly, how they can be a part of that in a way that nothing else can. That's the power of story. And so for today, please recognize and understand that. And I think if we do that today, if we continue to do that moving forward, if you step into your work and if you work to have just a little bit more trust in the power of your story and share it just a little bit more every day and step into your uncertainty around how it might show up, but trust that it will show up and be powerful. If you step into that we can all expand our work in ways that allow for more connection, that allow for us to see ourselves in each other, that allow us to move this work in the ways that our world is demanding that we move it in these days. And that if we do that, ultimately, we can all play our role and we can all ensure that every community that we are a part of, every community across the world, from Ferndale to Oakland, and around the world, is one where kids can be kids as long as they need to be. So thank you for letting me share. Heather's on her way back.
I'm here. So thank you so much for sharing, Julian. I really appreciate it. And I'd love to just hear from all of you. I know it can feel hard to share on these types of platforms. So just let me hear from all of you, your reaction to Julian's story. What stuck out to you about Julian's story? Anything that you want to say to him, just put it in the chat here. And yeah, so I see Marisol saying, thank you, Julian, powerful.
Hey, Marisol, nice to see you.
And Yana saying, thank you for sharing. So
thank you, Luis.
Yeah, what we want to do now is we want to support you all in understanding the technique and the process that Julian went through to get to that story. So let me just see a couple of your reactions. I loved how, and Linda said, I loved how in the beginning it sounded just like a friend talking. It didn't sound like pre-written or perfect. And then Ruth said, I love the way you contextualize your story within the story of West Oakland. And so I want to break this down really simply for you. So what Julian did first was share his personal story about what has driven him to do the work that he does. So he shared his story and how it shaped his central value. And in his case, his central value was healthy communities and building communities where kids can be kids as long as they needed to be. That is sort of the golden thread through his narrative. And so that's the first step, is how to share your personal story as it relates to what you're working on. And this method that we're using to craft the narrative was codified by our mentor, Marshall Gantz, who's this incredible storyteller and organizer. And we'll share more about that later. But the very first step is the story of self. And so that's how you start your story, is what is driving you and motivating you to do the work that you do.
Right. And it's about the values that guide your work. And what's important here is that you're giving context to your audience as to why you, who you are in some senses, but also why you are why you're a good person to be doing the work that you're doing. And it's not just about your CV or your skills or your schools. It's about what is driving you to do the work, right? And we understand that through values. We understand that through your values. What are the values that are guiding your path? And there's real power in that. And that's what the story of self provides. It really provides insight. So for me, I made a connection to this lesson that I learned at a young age, and something I've held dear around healthy communities, around places where kids can be kids. I provided context for the Million Person Project to say, hey, it's not just because I thought stories were cool and I like helping people give good speeches. It's because I see it critical to transforming the ways our communities, the possibilities within our communities. And I hold that very deeply, and here's why.
Yeah, and what Danielle says is that she loved how he wove his dad's kids can be kids value through the story. And so what he's showing is how that value became his. Mm-hmm. And this is why your specific personal story is so important. Because when you're speaking, people want to know your values, not only the values of the organization that you're working for or the values of the other people that work within the organization. When you're occupying a leadership role, people want to know your values and what shaped them. And so that's why there's so many people in secondary leadership roles that just, just the director can speak, or, I'm just helping that person. It's really critical that you come out of that secondary leadership role and occupy a primary leadership role for yourself and for the people that you're talking to. Mm-hmm. So that's the first part. That's the story of self. And then the second thing that he did is he connected his value to all of you. And so people always say, oh, but isn't it kind of indulgent to just share my story? No, it's a pathway to connection. And so what he did was he talked about how all of you in the community are helping communities be communities where kids can be kids as long as they need to be. So he really connected the healing work that you're doing with your clients, the activist work that you're doing in your community, the change work that you're doing on a policy level. All of those things that you're doing are helping to build communities where people can thrive, where young girls can see themselves as badass surfers. I see some surfer activists on here for women, where young people can understand that healing from their trauma is possible. Mm-hmm. Those are the things that Julian did in the second part, which was the story of us, which helped you feel part of his story. Yeah,
and that is a really critical piece of this puzzle. This is not, as Heather said, sometimes people feel like it's indulgent, but your story is important, and your role in your work is important, and it's in service to connection, and it's in service to understanding and acknowledging who your audience is as well. And that's what the story of us is about. I know, and there's assumptions that I'm making. I also have the privilege of knowing some of who you are, and I can call on that. But there's an assumption around the fact that you've responded to this, that you are people who are working to make change in your communities. And what does that mean? How do I understand that it's connected to my values, and how can I lift that up to say, hey, this is something we're in together? So I found this path to the Million Person Project. Your path is different, but it's connected to this idea that we can create a better world together. And that is, I want to call attention to the fact that is a really important piece of the power of this technique, is making that connection to your audience. And it's also really important for that to be something that's deeply authentic to you, and having a clear sense of why are you speaking to the people you're speaking to, and how do you want them to be a part of what you're up to. So that's just, I'll say that.
Yeah, and then the third piece, so this is a story told in 3 parts: the story of self, the story of us, and the third part is the story of now. And the story of now is when you lay out the urgent need for action. Why is it important for people to take action on that issue now? And then it's also, you're making an ask of the audience. So what's the invitation? Every time you speak, you want to get really, really clear on what the invitation is, what the ask is of the audience. And then the last piece is the vision for the future. Mm-hmm. And so Julian did all 3 of those things, showed the urgent need for action for you all to step up in your leadership and share your stories in a bigger way. Mm-hmm. He made an ask of you, which is to value your story every day a little bit more and see that it has power to impact the Burton Nalens in your community. There are somebody in your life that needs to hear your story. There's somebody in your community, on your email list, wherever, that needs to hear your story. And then the last piece is the vision for the future. Mm-hmm. He painted this picture where people are standing up, standing in their truth, being seen as all of who they are, and where, young people like Burton Nalens are seeing these amazing examples of people who are overcoming adversity and sharing their stories in a big and bold and public way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the only thing I'll say about that is that a couple of things is how does this technique separate from others? A lot of times when we hear people talking about their work, they start there. They say, our world is screwed. This is what I need you to do, right? So this, what's really important about this technique is contextualizing your ask in not only why it's urgent to take action, but what's possible together. Humans are moved by what's possible. Humans are moved by feeling that they can be a part of something and not just against something. So there's real power in having clarity around what you feel like is possible and sharing that. And then when that's wrapped in the context of who you are, why you do what you do, and you're connecting that to your audience, then you really have something, you create a pathway for people to join you in your work. It's not just this this sort of abrasive, immediate, do this with and for me, right? You've provided a pathway for people to walk down with you and for them to see themselves in your work in a different and more complete way. And that's the power of the story of self, the story of us, and the story of now.
Yeah, and so that's the technique that we wanted to share with you all today. And what the most important thing to understand about this technique is that in order to powerfully craft your narrative, you first have to do a lot of work to be able to understand your personal story, your life experiences in a pretty general way, how that shaped your values. You need to identify the values that are driving you and really be able to pull out, like I said, that golden thread that's going to weave through your narrative. Mm-hmm. And then you have to do a lot of work around your audience and understanding who they are and walk through a process of understanding what's the belief system that you want your audience to shift in your talk. Mm-hmm. And then the ask, identifying all of that, and then you craft the narrative. So a lot of people try to sit down and just start crafting the narrative without doing the story ownership work, without practicing standing in their power in their story, without doing values identification work. And that's really difficult mm-hmm. to just sit down and write a really compelling narrative.
Yeah, and I think what happens is people think in circles. It's really easy to think the same thoughts that you always think. And when you are really wanting to get into a deep story and when you're wanting to find your fullest truth, it requires you thinking about your story in ways that aren't necessarily just related to your work. It requires taking a step back and seeing what's there to work with. And that's the process that we support and provide is an opportunity to take a step back. I think about the idea that you don't know what you don't know. I think that can really apply to story excavation. Sometimes the motivations, you come up with some of the basic motivations and then you can't think your way out of that. That takes work and it takes some back and forth and it takes seeing it in different ways and responding to that and allowing your brain to move around it in different ways and your heart to feel it in different ways and not just think the same thing. It's like, well, I know why I got into this. It was this class that I took, right? Like there's more there. So that's the process that we allow us to find that more there.
Yeah, and I wanted to read what Sachi just wrote in. Trust in the power of your story was the takeaway and it's what I needed to hear and be reminded of. And it's valuable to be reminded to figure out why and who you're speaking to. So yes, those are really important takeaways from Julian's sharing. And so I just want to ask Julian a couple of questions. So where has being able to deliver your story taken you?
It's literally taken me all over the world. I will say that. I've had the opportunity to share my story through our work and through the work of Green for all over the place, from stages large and small. I've gotten the opportunity to represent, I think for me, one of the most exciting and important things is that tapping into this technique has allowed me to be really really confident that I'm showing up, that I'm bringing my most powerful self to what I feel like are really important things and issues in the world. So when I reflect on my story, there is a way that I'm able to revisit what's real for me and revisit what really moves me. And it takes me out of the space of like, I'm doing a job and I know that these are communities that we want to work in, or this is an organization that we're excited to be partnering with. And it takes me to a place of like, what does this work really mean? And that allows me to show up in completely different ways and in a way that is more deeply powerful, and feels like I'm doing my part right now. Right. And that's been really important. I think one of the ways that it's been, I think showed up the most for me is, I take a step back and think about my work at Green for All. And that work was really fueled by local organizations from all over the country. And so I got to really engage with organizers and individuals and organizations all over the country. And it was being able to step in and show up as an outsider, as somebody who came from Oakland and I'm now in Indianapolis, to be able to really start from a place of like, I'm opening up and sharing what really brings me to this work. Not Green for All talking points, not what we see as the green economy doing this, that, or the other, but like, look, I'm here because I care about your community in the same way I care about mine. And I think together we can create change together. Like that's the way I was able to show up authentically. And the doors that opened for myself and for the work, I am forever grateful for. So that's one thing I'd say.
Yeah, and so really what the tool has helped him to do is to build trust with his audience, mm-hmm. and to build trust with the people that he's speaking with. So whether you are showing up on Facebook Lives or you are doing speaking events or you are blogging or publishing articles, it's about building trust with the people who are receiving your message.
Yep.
So that's the first step. And in terms of where he has been able to share this story, one time he told me, oh, I got invited to share my story at this event. And, so he traveled, where was it? The ASHI event.
Oh yeah. That was in Nashville.
Yeah. So he travels to Nashville and he makes not a big deal of it at all. We go over his story, practices a few times, but no big deal. He gets there. The next thing he sends me is like a billboard of him. And then the room he's speaking in, which has 3,000 people in it and jumbotrons. And so it was, so people in the back can see it. And so and I was able to tune in. It was streamed, which was awesome. But it was really amazing to watch how even in that large scale of a room, how much stories just silence the room. Mm-hmm. So it's like, it's been able to take him onto stages and be a really powerful presence and not have that chatter in the back of these bigger speaking engagements. He's also been invited to speak at the Bioneers Conference, which is a really big conference, environmental conference here. And it's impressive to see how even in a conference like that, that's all about like heart and the environment, there still isn't people bringing in the deeper motivations there. And so when someone does, ears perk up and people really, this was a few years ago. Now people are doing much better storytelling, I think, all across, the movement. Right. But it was amazing to see how ears perk up for people when someone is sharing what is most personal to them. Mm-hmm. And so I just want to ask you one more question, which is, can you share with them what the obstacles have been around telling your story?
Yeah, there have been many. I think the biggest one is just some of what we've seen. I think it's a couple things. Wondering, one I will say is that my story is in relationship to my family. It's in relationship to my cousins. So I've struggled with, what does that mean? Is it my story? Am I somehow, is it somehow exploitative? And so I've really had to sit with, the truth of the story and really recognize like, no, that was a cornerstone and a turning point for me. So I think that's something that I've struggled with, and what's it helped me to get in, again, this is, an encouragement to step in baby steps into your truth, sharing that story in small places, sharing that story in conversation, telling people I was going to share that story. And they're like, no, you have to share that story. Like, you can't not share that story. that was really a part of the process for me. So I think that's been a big one. And then just generally, something that I already, mentioned earlier, I think when I get away from thinking about the stories that I want to share and what is the piece of myself that I want to bring, that's when the insecurities of like, oh, am I the right person to be speaking about this? Or like, I don't know what I'm talking about. Like when those imposter syndrome insecurities start to sneak in is when I move away and feel like it's actually when I start to feel like, oh, I have to rely on these numbers or this book or this quote from this person. And not to say that those don't have their place, because I integrate those types of things a lot. But when I try to rely on, I'm only going to convince them of the worth of what we're doing based on these other people and their opinions, that's actually when the insecurities start to creep in for me. When I can then reroute in like, it's not about my bona fides. It's about my connection and belief in the work, and it's about my commitment to it. Mm-hmm. When I can root in that, then all of that other thing has more power. All that other stuff has more power, and I'm able to stand there no matter what and say, hey, I'm here today for this reason, and here's why. And I believe and trust that I'm the right person to be here, and I want you to be here with me.
Yeah, and so I know that a lot of you are going through those same type of obstacles. And just even recently, he had a workshop down at a university with some master's students, and he called me from the hotel the night before, and he said, is my story too much for this group? Like, is it going to be, and, it's humbling for both of us. Like I go through this all the time. My, is my story not enough? Is my story going to weird people out? These are all questions that we're always in process with, both with ourselves and our clients. Mm-hmm. But it's our commitment. It's our commitment to show up fully as our truest self. Mm-hmm. And that's what we help our clients do, is be steady in standing in your power and standing in your truth.
Yeah.
And so
Yana, I just really quickly, I see Yana saying, is it too personal? I think that's a question that so many people ask. It's a question I've asked myself. One thing that I'll say about that is that story is a part of you and your life. All of our work is personal, ultimately. And so the question is, are you able and willing to stand in that? And give people the context that will help them understand who you are and understand your work that much better. So I feel like, yes, it's personal, and that's why it's important to share, because your work is personal. Your vision for the world is personal. So give people the context that they need to understand why you're the person that they can be a part of this story with, right? And that's where the power comes from.
Yeah, so I hear her saying, yay, she's writing it.
That's what's up.
So what Julian shared today and the obstacles that he's walked through, this is what we teach. We work with people, our clients, over the course of months to support them in being able to identify these core values, identify these stories, and practice and share it in a way that's really, really powerful. And we want to work with all of you. We are so excited about all of these people showing up on the call today, and we would love to continue to work with you. And so here's what we want to do is we have cleared our calendars completely for the whole afternoon. And we are going to be sitting here, and we want to talk to you all about if you want to take the next step with us and join one of our programs. And so we have our kombucha ready. We've got our coffee brewing. Mm-hmm. We're going to sit here until 9:00 tonight, and we're going to take any of the calls of you all who want to jump in. Mm-hmm. And so what we've done is we've each opened up 5 slots in our calendar for today for these 30-minute story breakthrough sessions, where you can see if you want to take the next step and work in one of our programs. And so what I want you to do is to book the call right here. I'm going to put the link in right now. And so I want you to book the call right now while you're still on the line. And so does everybody see this link here? Mm-hmm. That's where you book time with us. And we want you all to take the opportunity to go to another level with your story. Our programs help you to be able to, like we said, consistently stand in your power and learn what stories to share, how to share them, what details to include, what not to include. how to experiment and figure out what's too personal for you and not how to use yourself as that barometer. And so we are hoping that at least 10 of you will take us up on the calls today, and that we'll see them pinging, booking right now. And the other thing is that Julian has made himself available for 2 more calls tomorrow and 2 Saturday slots if you all can't make it. And so we will send out this link, but we also want to just let you know that the opportunity is now.
Yeah.
And we are so excited to support you in taking these next steps with your program. And some of you are already in our program, and it's so exciting to see you, Lily, and people joining today. And so, and in closing, this is what I want to share with you about 2 more clients. So one of our clients was, is an amazing writer. Her name is Angela. She's an incredible writer. And she had been writing and publishing on her own blog. And for her, she really wanted to go broader with her reach. And so she used our program to really hone in on the stories that were most important to her and to start actually pitching it to bigger places. And she now has a Elephant Journal article, and she also has an op-ed in the Chicago Tribune, which was incredible, that incorporates her own story about learning to organize and to be a change maker. And it's just incredible to see. I was so excited. We just started pitching everywhere. And that's what we do in our programs is we support you on getting that level of clarity. And then we support you in identifying where you want to go with the story. And then we just get you to pitch. We will look over your pitch and watch you go. And so that was Angela. And then the other person I wanted to share about was Reshma Sujani, who she actually got a call on the TED, she got a piece on the TED main stage. And so that was really, really exciting. And so it was this huge opportunity to be able to share her story. And she is a great speaker, but she wanted to share something a little more truthful. She wanted to go to a deeper level of her story. And so we worked with her on that. It's been a total viral success. It has 3.8 million views or something. And it's totally taken her as a thought from someone who's running a nonprofit and a powerful leader to a total thought leader. And so that's the kind of work that we do, is we support all of you in stepping into your power, stepping into your thought leadership. And so we'd love to have
come and give us a call.
Give us a call.
I just want to say I shared my story to provide an example, but I really mean what I say, which is that your story is a huge part of your ability to bring your critical work into the world. And so my ask remains to find those small ways to step into it, and let one of those small ways to step into it to give us a call, and let's talk about how we can help and what if any of our programs are right for you, but generally how you can move that forward, because we're just committed to that. We recognize the power that's on this small webinar, and we want to help it find its path into the world in bigger ways.
Yeah, and so we'd love to hear from some of you of who's signing up for a call. Just put it there in the chat, and we are excited to spend our day talking to all of you, and we are also excited to continue to support you in whatever way you need to be supported to cross the barrier and be standing in your story in a more powerful way.
Yeah.
And so
thank you all for tuning in.
It
means so much to us. We're so glad to get to be on the line with you today. And we hope to hear from all of you, honestly, but certainly some of you set up some time through the weekend. I'm going to be here this weekend in this beautiful rain, sitting here talking to you all, talking story. There's no place I'd rather be. So thank you. Yeah,
and you all have my email, so just email me, and if you have any questions, and book that call. And gracias, Martha, for joining. And I'm sorry we speak so fast. I know that you're an English learner, and you're tuning in from South America, and we're speaking so fast. But we appreciate you being here, and thank you, Melissa, and
all your help.
And Danielle and Neeraj.
Yeah, it's great to see my EL folks on here. Thank you for tuning in. I appreciate y'all.
Yeah, so we're just going to stop the